Good morning. I'd like to begin with a question. And the question is, do you have a favorite holiday? Throughout most of my life, it's always been Christmas. But lately I've found that I'm gravitating more and more towards Easter. I've come to the conclusion that the Lenten season, with its time for preparation, leading to Holy Week, and then through the crucifixion to our Lord's resurrection, are really foundational to my faith as a follower of Jesus Christ. In today's gospel reading from Luke, we learn about two reappearances by Jesus to his disciples following his crucifixion. The first is along a dusty road to Emmaus, and the second is in Jerusalem, where the 11 disciples have secretly gathered after their beloved leader had been convicted, condemned, and executed by both the religious and government authorities. And you have to bear that in mind. It wasn't just the government authorities, it was both the religious and government authorities. Understandably, the disciples were quite fearful that they would be next to be hunted down, next to be arrested, tried, and executed like their Lord. So they were feeling quite vulnerable. They were confused, dejected. And because the person whom they gave up everything to follow, who was so wise and so brave, so compassionate, was dead. And to make matters worse, his body had disappeared as if vanished into thin air. In today's reading, two men are seen walking on a dusty road to Emmaus. They are deep in conversation. And when Jesus suddenly comes walking along with them, they're not aware that it is he. And together they continue walking and talking about all the things that had happened in Jerusalem over the last 3 days. The men are clearly upset and very nervous. They keep mumbling something about how they had hoped that he, Jesus, would be the one. That is, he would be the Messiah, the person to deliver their people from oppression. But now he was dead. And that word seemed to weigh heavily on their lips. There's nothing as terminal as death. No matter which form you use, the expression dead connotes finality. There is no returning. The men also told Jesus how the women who went to reclaim Jesus' body were surprised when all they found was an empty tomb. Now here's another question that I have for you, and all answers are correct. In your lifetime, have you ever experienced the untimely death of a famous leader? I was only a 4th grader the day my teacher came into the classroom. She had tears running down her face. And then she slowly turned to us and announced that our president has died. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR as he was called, had led our nation through a terrible recession, which people called the Great Depression, and through a world war. And even though he spent the better part of his life in a wheelchair, he had this stature and a commanding voice, such a voice that I can still remember whenever I hear it from a recording or whenever I watch a PBS documentary. That day, our nation went into mourning, and men and women of every race and color mourned his passing. It left a lasting impression upon me. I can only imagine how lost the disciples must have felt when Jesus died that day on the cross, not celebrated as a hero, but like the two criminals hanging from crosses beside him, dying on the cross would be a slow, agonizing method of punishment and humiliation. It's pretty clear that none of Jesus' followers saw this coming. You have to wonder, had they known that their world would so suddenly crumble, would they have followed Jesus this far? Take a moment and try and imagine how things would have turned out had the cross been the end of the story. The disciples would have dispersed. Certainly they would have become cynical and delusioned, and Christianity would never have started. In other words, we wouldn't be here together this morning in worship. There would be no such thing as a church or a church building. And certainly there would not have been a Christmas or an Easter celebration.